After taking the steps down at a slow jog, he reached the building's entrance, opened the oh God, I'm talking too fast. Just slow it down. Administrative center. After taking the steps down at a slow jog, he reached the building's entrance, opened the long double door. The long double door. What would that look like? Is this like Alice in Wonderland or something? Okay. Straight ahead at the end of the white corridor. Oh my God. It's like the words are tumbling out of my mouth and my mouth can't catch up to it. Does that even make sense? I don't know. Okay. Have you noticed that the more we get into the action parts of the story and like the climax of the story, the shorter the chapters get? That's just kind of like my thing, my writing thing. I don't know why. It's like it just feels more dynamic that you're getting Reuben's perspective and then Neesa's perspective, and then it's like boom, boom, boom to see as the action progresses and gets more heightened. So that's how I work my stories, and welcome back. My name is Dina Haynes. I'm reading to you my book called Neesa, the first in the original reality book series that is on Amazon right now. So go grab a copy so that you have one to look back and see how closely did I stay to the actual book, or did I switch some things up? Just kidding. It's probably not quite exact, but I'm the author, so I can do that. And it's kind of tricky when you're reading it out loud to make sure you differentiate between who is speaking. But there are links below where you can find the book on Amazon and also get the second book, because I think once you finish this, you're probably going to want to see, well, you could check right now to see who that book is about, but you're definitely going to want to hear that heroine's story. If you're new to the channel, now is the time to go back to the beginning, because I'm about to drop some spoilers on chapter 27, and it was a quickie. So go back now, go back to the beginning, get introduced to these characters, and we'll see. And then you can watch all the way through to chapter 28, which is where we are right now. Neesa is torn, obviously. Reuben abandoned her, didn't tell her, didn't warn her, and he's avoiding her calls. Like, it feels like he's doing everything wrong, which is kind of on par with what Reuben does, which is probably kind of why I like him so much. I do love these kind of tortured, really broken male characters. Yeah, so Neesa's at home. She's totally heartbroken, and let's get on with chapter 28 so we can find out how Reuben's search for his father is going, and let's do it now. Chapter 28, Reuben's perspective. At mile 1, he was convinced he'd lost his mind going for a run this time of year. The cold paid his attempts to dress appropriately no mind whatsoever, but he took pride in the fact that he was awake without the aid of caffeine and sugar. He wouldn't have been out if he hadn't felt the need to earn the 3 cinnamon rolls he'd snatched from the free breakfast and stashed in his room. He'd shown up early to get first pick and was eager to grab some coffee and bottled water on the way in after his run. Every moment his mind was idle, he worried about how his impulsive decision had infected Denise. He didn't want to waste time getting back to her. The longer he took to solve this case, the more explaining he'd have to do. After a long hot shower, he ate breakfast while trying to go through the information he had on Surrey and got nowhere, waiting for each sluggish page to fully load. Reuben needed to figure out the best time to find the man at home, so he bagged his computer and headed to the university to see what he could dig up in person. Minutes later, he parked at the main campus lot outside the Regent Administrative Center. After taking the steps down at a slow jog, he reached the building's entrance, opened the large double doors, and shook off the cold. Straight ahead at the end of a white corridor sat a huge desk with a young woman behind it. As soon as they locked eyes, he flashed her a charming half-smile the ladies loved. She asked, "May I help you?" She looked like a typical girl next door, blonde hair, blue eyes, sweet face, barely legal. He said, "Hi," his voice like smoke and fine sandpaper. "How are you today?" She said, "I'm fine, and you?" He said, "Good, thanks for asking." He took his time since not many people were around. "It's kind of quiet around here." She said, "Yeah, well, we're coming up on finals week, so." He detected a note of sarcasm and noticed the open books on the desk in front of her. He said, "Oh, you probably want to get back to studying. I'll try to make this quick." She said, "Too late," with a cheeky smile. He laughed. "Right. I'm looking for someone named Edward Surrey. He's not a student. Should be an older guy, late 50s. The girl said, "Officer Surrey. Yeah, everybody knows him." Reuben's eyebrows shot up. "Officer? As in police?" She said, "He's one of the campus security guys, but he's cool. Like a cool grandpa, you know?" His stomach dropped at the coincidence. Surrey was in law enforcement, and so was he. He said, "Okay, and is he here now?" He spun his head around as if the man were hiding behind a pillar and would pop out all surprise and nice to meet you. She said, "He mostly works at night. Are you his nephew? 'Cause I'm pretty sure I've heard him talk about his nephew before." Reuben said, No, I'm a friend of the family." She said, "Oh, well, I can't give out his home address or anything, but is there something else I can help you with?" Reuben said, "No, you've been great." He turned to walk off, then held his palm up to her. "Thank you." He barely remembered his steps out of the building, his mind racing over the information she dropped on him. A security officer. Had to be a coincidence. It didn't automatically tie them together, he thought, reeling himself in. Surrey had a nephew, which meant he had a sibling, maybe more, so there was extended family. His mother didn't have any family, at least none she'd talked about, nor had they received any visitors while he was growing up. All they knew and had was each other. But Reuben was jumping to conclusions. Surrey might not be related to him at all. He could merely be a false lead. He hoofed it back to his rent-a-car, got in and shut the door. In the silence, adrenaline made his head pound. He needed more coffee and sugar and a plan of attack. Using his navigation, he drove half a mile and found a Starbucks on the corner of 14th Street and College. He parked at the curb and paid at an electric meter a block away. As he made his way down the sidewalk, he noticed that the businesses and restaurants were all college-themed. It wasn't a surprise when he opened the door to the cafe and saw that students filled most of the seats, their faces transfixed on small computer screens or open books. The atmosphere was quiet except for the thin veil of music in the background and the screech of the coffee bean grinder. "I see you. Have you watched the video this far and not liked it yet? Well, do that right now. Just hit the little pause button and press like, subscribe, as well as that little bell icon, and then we can continue on with the story." He ordered his normal caramel macchiato with heavy whipped cream, hot instead of the Frappuccino version this time, and stood at the pickup counter to wait. A shift had already begun inside him, and the meeting with his father had yet to take place. He saw images of him and his new dad laughing together, sharing stories about being in law enforcement, catching up on the 30-plus years they'd spent in the dark. None of the scenes involved him berating the man over neglect. Fantasy, he chided himself. All hope and no reality made him a foolish little boy. His heart beat a mile a minute as it dawned on him that the time to face his greatest fear was at hand. He heard his name called, picked up his drink, and found a single seat near the entrance. He looked down at his phone. He'd subconsciously opened it to the recent call screen, his finger poised to call Denise. He thought he wanted to do this alone, but he was mistaken. Hearing her voice would make all the difference right now. He was scared how much his life would change in the next few hours, and he wanted Denise here to give him strength. Without her, this experience would fall flat if Surrey turned out to be his father and a good man. And if it turned out bad, he could see himself sliding into a deep pit of self-loathing. He knew if he called her, she would have words of encouragement. That was, if he hadn't fucked things up between them. He leaned on her for support so much now that he couldn't remember how he had gotten by before meeting her. Then it occurred to him that he had experienced life in shades of gray. None of the risks he had taken up until this point held any weight because he'd had nothing to lose before. None of his accomplishments had held any meaning without the presence of someone who depended on him, rooted for him. For once in his pathetic life, He saw in vibrant colors of every emotion under the rainbow. It made sense now why the bad came with the good in life, to give it spectrum. The highs and the lows created harmony. 24 hours without Denise, and their song had hit a bad note. He'd made a mistake shutting her out. He needed her, and if that involved having a baby, he would make it work because she would be by his side through it all. Oh, isn't that sweet? I'm like, oh, I want a guy like him. No, no, but seriously, I do. That was the end of chapter 28. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please like the video, hit subscribe, and the little bell icon so you'll be notified when the next chapter goes up, because stuff is happening, okay? You're not going to want to miss it. You're not going to want to miss a beat, okay? So tune in next time to chapter 29, and I will see you then.